Նախ ուզում եմ զգուշացնել, որ հանդիպումը ձայնագրվում է ու ձայնագրումը հենց նոր սկսվեց։ Այսօրվա թեմայի շուրջ եմ ուզում խոսել, թեման ներկայացնել։ Այսօր հավաքվել ենք Արդարության եւ նախապաշարմունքի թշնամի Սրփուհի Դուսապը եւ 19-րդ դարի արևմտահայ ֆեմինիստական փիլիսոփայությունը թեմայի շուրջ։ Բանախոսությունը այսօրվա կազմակերպվում է ֆեմինիզմը մարմնայրական միջազգային փառատոնի շրջանակներում, որի համադրողը Susanna-ն է Gyulamiryan, իսկ համահիմնադրողը Fem գրադարանը։ Հանդիպումը նախ ուզում եմ ասել, որ տեղի ունենալու երկու լեզվով, այսինքն ընդհանուր հանդիպումը տեղի ունենալու անգլերեն, բայց քննարկումը կարող ենք հայերեն, անգլերեն փորձել իրականացնել, եթե թարգմանության կարիք լինի, ես եւ Աննան փորձենք թարգմանել, ու Աննան հիմա անգլերենով նաեւ այս հատվածը կներկայացնի։
Hello everybody, thank you for participating in this event, which is entitled A Foe of Injustice and Prejudice, Srpuhi Dussap and the 19th-century Western Armenian Feminist Thought. Just for your information, this meeting is being recorded so that those people who didn't have a chance to attend today follow it afterwards. This talk is organized in the frames of Feminism Corporeal International Festival. The curator of the festival is our friend Susanna Gyulamiryan, and the co-curator is FemLibrary Armenia. The presentation will be in English, but during the Q&A sessions, if you want to ask your questions in Armenian, we will translate it into English.
Մի փոքր ներկայացնեմ թեման, շատերի համար նշանակավոր հեղափոխական, մյուսների համար էլ սկանդալային decadent Սրփուհի Դուսապին, որին հայկական George Sand են հաճախ անվանել, ժամանակակից արևմտահայ գրականության առաջին կին վիպասանն է, իբրև կրթության հարցերով եռանդուն ակտիվիստ, իր ֆեմինիստական էսսեներում շատ ջատագովել է կանանց կրթությունը, ընդդիմացել է կանանց անգործությանը, սեռերի միջև համակարգային անհավասարությունները եւ տղամարդկանց գերակայությունից առաջացած հասարակական չարիքները ցուցադրող իր 3 սիրավեպերում Դուսապը պատկերում է ազատագրված հայ կնոջը, որը հավատարիմ է իրեն եւ տնօրինում է իր կյանքը, ու հենց այսօրվա զրույցի ընթացքում էլ Մելիսան Դուսապի կյանքն ու աշխատանքը կկապի ուշ օսմանյան շրջանում հայերի կյանքում տեղի ունեցող սոցիալական եւ տնտեսական վերափոխումների պատմական համատեքստի հետ, ինչպես նաեւ կքննարկի Դուսապի ֆեմինիզմի եզրագծերը իր ժամանակի համաշխարհային փիլիսոփայական հոսանքների հետ համեմատության մեջ։
A celebrated revolutionary for many and scandalous decadent for others, Srpuhi Dussap, often referred to as the Armenian George Sand, was the first woman novelist of modern Western Armenian literature. A passionate education activist herself, in her feminist essay, she advocated for female education and opposed women's idleness. Her 3 romance novels, where she exposed the systemic inequalities between sexes and societal ills caused by male supremacy, are texts that sculpted the emancipated Armenian woman who is true to herself and owns her life. In this talk, Melissa Bilal will situate Dussap's life and work within the historical context of social and economic transformations in the late Ottoman Armenian life and discuss the contours of her feminism in relation to the global philosophical currents of her time.
Ներկայացնում եմ շատ սիրելի ընկեր Մելիսային։ Մելիսա Բիլալը Լոս Անջելեսի Կալիֆոռնիայի համալսարանի UCLA-ի հայ երաժշտության ծրագրի փոխտնօրենն է եւ դասավանդում է համալսարանի երաժշտական ազգագրության ամբիոնում, նաեւ Հայաստանում ամերիկյան համալսարանի գենդերային ուսումնասիրությունների ծրագրի հիմնական թիմի անդամ է, Ստամբուլի Բողոզչիի համալսարանում սովորել է սոցիոլոգիա, բակալավր եւ մագիստրատուրա։ Իսկ արդեն Չիկագոյի համալսարանում ավարտել է երաժշտական ազգագրության գծով ասպիրանտուրան, դասավանդել է Բողոզչիի համալսարանում, ինչպես նաև Կոլումբիայի համալսարանում։ Մելիսայի հետազոտական աշխատանքը կենտրոնանում է հայկական փորձառության վրա, Թուրքիայի փոքրամասնությունների եւ հիշողության հետ կապված քաղաքականության համատեքստում, ինչպես նաև հայ երաժշտական պրակտիկաների պատմական եւ ազգագրական ուսումնասիրության եւ ուշ օսմանյան շրջանում հայ մտավորական կյանքի գենդերային պատմության վրա։
Let me present our friend Melissa Bilal. Melissa Bilal is the Associate Director of the Armenian Music Program and lecturer in the Department of Ethnomusicology at UCLA. She is also a core member of the Gender Studies minor program at the American University of Armenia. Melissa studied sociology at Boğaziçi University, Istanbul, and received her PhD in ethnomusicology from the University of Chicago. She taught at the Boğaziçi University and Columbia University. Bilal's research focuses on the Armenian experience in relation to Turkey's minority and memory politics, historical and ethnographic study of Armenian musical practices, and the gender history of the late Ottoman Armenian intellectual life.
Մասաչուսեթսի տեխնոլոգիական ինստիտուտում որպես հրավիրյալ ուսումնագետ Մելիսան աշխատելու ընթացքում Լեռնա Այգմեկչօղլուի հետ համատեղ կազմակերպում է տարեկան հանդիպումների շարք հայկական ֆեմինիստական ուսումնասիրությունների աշխատարանի շրջանակում եւ ստեղծում է հայկական ֆեմինիստական հետազոտությունների կոլեկտիվ։ Բիլալը եւ Այգմեկչօղլուն համատեղ հեղինակել են Արդարության աղաղակը 5 հայ ֆեմինիստ գրող Օսմանյան կայսրությունից մինչև Թուրքիայի Հանրապետություն գիրքը թուրքերենով, իսկ այժմ համագործակցում են ֆեմինիզմը հայերենով պատմություն փաստաթղթերում, գրքի թվային եւ հումանիտար գիտությունների նախագծի շրջանակներում։ Թե այս գիրքը եւ թե նախագիծը կենտրոնանում են 12 հայ ֆեմինիստ գրող ակտիվիստների կյանքի եւ ստեղծագործությունների վրա օսմանյան եւ հետօսմանյան համատեքստերում։ Մելիսան այժմ աշխատում է նաև սեփական մենակության վրա, որի նախնական վերնագիրն է «Արթնացող օրերոցային հայկական բնիկության, երաժշտության եւ հիշողության գենդերային քաղաքականությունները ուշ շրջանի օսմանյան կայսրությունում», ինչպես նաև հաշտեցման վնասվածքները լինելով հայ-թուրքե ազգագրական հետազոտության վրա։
While a visiting scholar of history at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, together with Dr. Lerna Ekmekçioğlu of MIT, Bilal co-launched the annual meeting series Feminist Armenian Studies Workshop and the Feminist Armenian Research Collective. Ekmekçioğlu and Bilal are the co-editors of the book A Cry for Justice, 5 Armenian feminist writers from the Ottoman Empire to the Republic of Turkey, published in Turkish, and are now collaborating on the book and digital humanities project Feminism in Armenian, a history in documents, which focuses on the lives and works of 12 Armenian feminist writer activists in the Ottoman and post-Ottoman context. Melissa is currently working on her monograph tentatively titled Wake Up Lullaby, Gender Politics of Armenian Indigeneity, Music and Memory in the Late Ottoman Empire, and the ethnographic research project Injuries of Reconciliation, Being Armenian in Turkey. Melissa, thank you very much for agreeing to be part of the festival. The floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. That was such a long introduction and very generous. Merci Shad. Armenecan, Annacan, Arpi, Arpine, Urish, Arpi Atabegyan, Գներես, որ պաղտուցիկ ու բանը տասախոսությունըտ, որովհետև Facebook-են դուրս եկա և չտեսա, որ բան ամսի 17-ին էր, բայց I'll definitely watch it. Ուրիշ ով գտեսնամ գոր, իմ սիրելի ուսանողի Սոֆիա, թուն, Սոֆիա?
Այո։
Թուն ես, չէ?
Այո, ես եմ։
Բարև։
Բարև ձեզ։
Շատ կարոցեր եմ ձեզ, շատ շնորհակալ եմ Եվ Սուզանային հետ շատ շնորհակալություն գազմագերբելու համար. So, yeah, let me, after that very long and generous introduction, let me actually share my screen and unfortunately, I am going to present it in English, but I promise one day I will be presenting in Eastern Armenian. Not today, but one day, very soon. Okay, so prejudice is injustice. Injustice is a lie. To lie is to spit truth in the face, wrote Srpuhi Dussap in Mayda, her first novel published in 1883. A male columnist in Constantinople, Istanbul, passionately advised Armenian women to stay away from this book. According to him, it was a kind of publication one should strictly avoid reading. The very first novel by a woman in modern Armenian literature, Mayda, was a fast sold out title and the most debated literary work in its day. The novel triumphed against its opponents and changed many young Armenian women's lives, and one of them is Zabeliya Sayan. And its writer, Srpuhi Dussap, a celebrated revolutionary for many and scandalous decadent for others, often referred as the George Sand, Armenian George Sand, became the most prominent social novelist of her time and the most celebrated feminist idol for generations of Armenian women of letters. The lecture today focuses on Srpuhi Dussap, one of the 12 women featured in the book, Feminism in Armenian, an Interpretive Anthology. And I am co-authoring it with Lerna Ekmekçioğlu, as Armine and Anna mentioned. And this talk is based on the chapter I'm writing for this book. Little note, all uncaptioned photos on my slides and all the texts are from Yerevan Charents Museum of Literature and the Arts, and National Library of Armenia, Askain Krataran, Vienna Mekhitarist Congregation Library. And the English translations from the original Armenian text that I will quote throughout this talk are done by Jeffrey Koshkaryan for our book. Srpuhi Vahan was born in Ortaköy. By the way, I'm in Istanbul right now. So this is across from me, the other side of the Bosphorus. I circled it in blue. It's the district, Ortaköy district of Istanbul, Constantinople, in 1841. Having lost her father at the age of 1, she was raised by her mother, Nazlı Vahan or Nazeli Vahanyan. And Nazlı Vahan was a well-educated daughter of the upper-class Arzumanyan family. Young Srpuhi had the class privilege of building a sophisticated background in science, philosophy, literature, and history, as well as theater, fine arts, and music appreciation. She was very well versed in Armenian, Turkish, Ottoman Turkish, French, Italian, Greek, and English. And she played the piano. So upper class, Constantinopolitan, urban, bourgeois woman. But she did not have the opportunity to go abroad to master her studies like her older brother, Hovhannes, did. It was he, Hovhannes, a Paris-trained chemist, later Ottoman politician and minister, who home tutored Srpuhi after she completed a few elementary grades at a local French school. In her early 20s, Srpuhi began working with the renowned poet Mgrdich Beşiktaşliyan as her mentor of Armenian language and literature. Beşiktaşliyan encouraged Srpuhi to publish her first poems in Venice's Pasmaweb literary philological journal. The strong intellectual and emotional bond between Mgrdich Beşiktaşliyan and Srpuhi Dussap manifested itself in continuous literary creativity. One of the most historic outcomes of their collaboration was Srpuhi's song settings of Beşiktaşliyan's poems from the well-known Zeytun series, inspired by the 1862 Armenian peasant resistance in Zeytun. Although we don't have any documentation of Srpuhi's musical compositions, it is accounted that music was a central part of her life. Also after her marriage to her piano teacher, French Levanten musician Paul Dussap, who later became Imperial Orchestra conductor and composer, Dussap Pasha, and that Srpuhi supervised their daughter Doreen's career as a budding concert pianist. We also have a little note by Srpuhi that she wrote the lyrics and the melody of a lullaby she used to sing for Doreen. So we can very confidently say that Dussap was very musical, Srpuhi was very musical. So above all, Srpuhi's intellectual formation owes to her mother's literary salon and education activism. A staunch supporter of female education, Nazlı Vahan was one of the major patrons of Constantinopolitan girls' orphanages and schools, a legacy her daughter, Srpuhi, committed herself to keeping alive. Srpuhi also served as Akkadahnam Dignans Ngerutyun's vice secretary under her mother's presidency. This organization provided various essential welfare services to all community members in need. Its specific focus, however, was sponsoring female learning. It was founded in 1864 as the continuation of the former Xınamagalui Dignan, the trustee association of Ortaköy's Srpuhi Girls' School, founded by Nazlı Vahan herself. So Srpuhi's mother was a founder of one of the earliest girls' schools in Istanbul in 1859. And this is in Istanbul. This is the Ortaköy Church. And on the right, this is where the Hripsimyan school was back in the day. So of course, it doesn't exist anymore. When in May 1879, a group of Hripsimyan's alumni, under Nazlı's guidance, initiated Tubrotaser Hayuhyats Ngerutyun, which later became Tubrotaser Dignans Ngerutyun, School-Loving Armenian Women's Society, to patron Armenian young women's training as teachers, to serve in provincial schools, in Kabar. Srpuhi would soon assume the chair of its General Assembly. So the school that Vahan started, Nazlı started, the students of the school start to Tubrotaser, and they ask Nazlı to sponsor them, to patron them, and then Srpuhi becomes the chair very soon. During her presidency between 1880 and 1887, the association Tubrotaser was able to put together a substantial budget from hundreds of members' fees, donations from banks and wealthy community members, and through fundraiser events, including the very first Armenian art exhibit in the Ottoman capital. As a part of her efforts to secure funds, Srpuhi also published a tiny monograph, Ashkarapar Haylezun, Modern Armenian Language. This is also a period where Armenians in Istanbul are simplifying their language, modernizing their language. They start writing in Ashkarapar. So she published Ashkarapar Haylezun. It did not only bring revenue to Tubrotaser's school in Ortaköy, but also stood as an important manifestation of Srpuhi's support for the use of the Armenian vernacular as the modern literary language, as opposed to Krapar, the classical Armenian. In this period, Dussap also published 2 essays that manifested her perspective on education, informed by her first-hand experience as an education activist. In Hay Ngerutyun, Armenian Society, that she published in 1882, she came up with a communal solution to the pressing problem of how to manage the finances of Armenian education institutions and organizations. Her Ganans Tastiaragutyuna, Women's Education, that was published in 1880, on the other hand, is more theoretical. In this article, she talked back to the prevailing narratives, discrediting women's enlightenment by associating it with decaying moral standards, masterfully utilizing the dominant discourses of familial happiness, God's will, natural and societal harmony. These are the discourses that the women, first wave feminists, were using to advance their demands. As well as national unity, national progress. Using all these discourses, Dussap attacked bashers of women's education. She stated that only when women had full access to an education based on solid principles that would help them become free thinkers, could one judge the moral results of women's enlightenment. Meaning, don't judge women when you're not allowing them to be free thinkers. This is basically unfair. So I'd like to read some quotes from this article that I like. And you can follow it in Armenian if you like on the slide. So, quote, maybe I should read it in Armenian. Is there anyone who doesn't read or understand Armenian?
Yes, there are some participants who
Oh,
don't
okay.
know
Then I
Armenian.
read it. Okay. Let me do both then. Okay. Okay. So, մեծավ մասամբ կանանց թերությունները յուրյանց արած գրթության եւ մասամբ մարդկային ջնշողական օրինաց արդյունքն են։ Այն օրենքները նոցա վրա փռնանալով ընկերության հավասարակշռությունը կդաբալեն։ Բնությունը ընկերության ներդաշնակությունը հաստատած է երկու սերին փարոյական եւ մտավորական հավասար զարգացմանը վրա։ Այս երկու փարոյական զորությունները միանալով զիրար կամփոխչացնեն, մինչդեռ զադված գենալով զիրար կոչնչացնեն։ So I'm reading the translation. To a large extent, women's defects stem from the education they are given and are also, to some extent, from the fruit of oppressive human laws. Those laws, exercising their tyranny over her, destroy society's equilibrium. Nature has granted social harmony in the two sexes equal moral and intellectual development. These two moral powers, when they combine, complement each other. When they remain separate, they cancel each other out. Երբ կանայք հիմնավոր դաստիարակությամբ գանքնին իբրև սյուն ընկերական շենքին, փոխանակ նորա լոգ զարդը ըլլալու, երբ հաստատուն ուսմամբ յուրյանց միտքերը գաստուրեն, երբ թոթափեն այն նախաբաշարումները, որ անցյալ սերունդները թողուցած են իբրև ժառանգություն, երբ իբացնեն այն սև փիձերը, որ գաղարդեն յուրյանց խիղճը, հորժամ լավակուն նախագրթական դպրոցը մայրենի օթևանն է եւ ջարդարակույն վարժաբեդը մայրը and ուսման ասպարեզը բաց ըլլալու է գանանց արչեւ առանց նոցա մտավորական փերման I can see okay մտավորական փերման սահման տնելու quote When women with a firmly grounded education stand as pillars of the social edifice, rather than merely adorning it, when their minds are reinforced by solid learning, when they shake off the prejudices that are the legacy of past generations, when they cast off the black stains that besmirch their conscience, then the best primary school is the maternal abode, and the mother is the most effective teacher. The path of learning must be open before women, and no limit should be imposed on their intellectual inclinations. So Dussap's two other articles, namely Kanime Khost Ganans Ankordutyan Masin and Ganans Ashkadutyan Skespunka, published in 1881, further the education demand for women, pairing it with a call to stand up against societal pressures against women's employment or work in general. Dussap calls women to break free by overcoming the biases against their working and by taking up a sense of agency. Quote, be active, women. Let prejudice be shattered before your feet. Elevate yourselves. Do not be ashamed to work, for that is humanity's vocation, unquote. Dussap believes that if women as rational beings can make use of their intellectual and moral capacities, they can truly feel their essence and natural calling, and thus be happy. For her, this entails being active, breaking idleness, earning a living with one's own efforts, engaging in civic activities, being self-sufficient, independent of any outside influence on their free will. Briefly, having a part in social and communal life. When women think, act, and speak freely, according to Dussap, they can improve their social conditions and prove that their inferior status is due to patriarchal constraints. While Dussap's main focus is the women of her class, the upper class aristocratic or bourgeois women, whom she criticizes for demeaning any kind of labor, be it physical or affective labor, and for being passive consumers. She advises women of all economic backgrounds to stand on their own 2 feet. Moreover, she assigns women a vital task in sustaining their family's livelihood and happiness. Dussap brings the invisible work women do in the domestic sphere. She ascribes women the responsibility of becoming role models for the future generations. She also ascribes them the power of shaping the destiny of a whole nation and entire humanity. This text is a powerful social analysis from a fresh perspective informed by economic inequalities or class antagonism among urban Armenian women that also emphasizes the sameness of the structural obstacles that prevent women across classes from bettering their lives. While resisting the idea of a principled moral education that enables women to unchain themselves, rather than a distorted, unscientific education that has served to tamper with women's nature and make her unaware of her chains, Dussap adds that ignorance and idleness morally weaken women, make women slaves of the male gaze and pleasures, deprive them of an awareness of their rights, letting men make and practice law as they please. Dussap employs a romanticized, uncorrupted, primitive natural life, which is very common of her time. She basically romanticizes this idea of primitiveness and natural life. With that argument, she powerfully states that by ruling over women, men harm the harmony and well-being of entire humanity. She counters any discourse against women's ill behavior by showing that it is women's survival mechanism in a society that throws off their balance by constantly victimizing them. Because there was a common discourse in the society, especially in like upper class Armenians, criticizing women for some ill behavior. And she says it's not essential. It's because of it's some kind of a survival mechanism for women in the society. So it is clear that Dussap has been following the feminist criticism of Napoleonic civil law. She tells Armenians that the civilization, that is French civilization that they're all following, the upper classes, they imitate, in fact, deprives women of their basic rights while not sparing them from the harshest punishment for their smallest wrongs. So she's basically ahead of her time and saying, Armenians, you are trying to modernize, you are imitating the French system, French law or French values, but that Napoleonic civil law that you are adopting is not giving women the rights and also not sparing them from the harshest punishments. In March 1882, with the invitation of Dr. Mavroiani, the chair of the Greek Philological Association in Pera, Dussap delivered a speech in French to the Greek community. It was soon translated into Armenian and published in the local press. In this talk, Dussap talked about, provided a detailed account on the recent developments in Armenian intellectual life by evaluating Mkhitaryan's and European educated intellectuals' contributions to national awakening. She explained the revival movements among Constantinople, Smyrna, and Tbilisi Armenians, the organized efforts for mass education among Armenians and literacy across the Armenians of the Ottoman Empire, as well as the flourishing Armenian performance, theater, fine arts, and the importance of those for national awakening. She employed this common narrative art of the Golden Age, Bosketar, and the decline under foreign domination, that is Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, and revival, even before the Ottoman Empire, the Seljuks. She displayed her knowledge of Greek and European writers and philosophers and Armenians' relations with them. One of the most important parts of her talk that is different than the common discourse of her time is that she brought up women's participation in Armenian national reconstruction as an evidence of progressiveness. Attended by 500 people, this talk was praised as a success in Armenian and European language papers, but it was also criticized for not using the word Hayastan, Armenia. In her defense, male writers considered it as a very brave lecture, especially under the heavy censorship of the Hamidian period in the Ottoman Empire, and her precarious position with her immediate family members being Ottoman officers, meaning her brother and husband. So Dussap is coming from a family that is very much connected to the Ottoman government and the court. For us feminist historians today, this speech is a unique documentation of the late 19th century feminists' evaluation of Armenian awakening movement while she herself is taking part in it. Why is this important? Because we don't read this in our history books. Dussap was aware that the ideas she expressed publicly were perceived to be too radical and even scandalous. She was probably also conscious that her feminist critique was tamed by some of her male comrades to promote a rather domesticated understanding of Armenian women's demands, because sometimes she was praised, but for the wrong reasons. She moved forward to express her resistance through fiction and to sculpt the emancipated Armenian woman she envisioned. Between 1883 and 1887, she wrote 3 novels to expose the ills caused by male supremacy. Maida, Siranush, Araxia Ganvarjuin. Maida was published in 1883, Siranush 84, and Araxia in 87. These 3 are feminist romance novels that use women's self-consciousness as a stylistic and rhetorical device and articulate women's thoughts and emotions suppressed in public. I guess we can pretty safely say that it is Dussap who introduced women's voice to Armenian literature. We can say with equal confidence that she was also the pioneer of the genre of novel in the entire Armenian literature, something that we are not very often told by our male literary critics, that she is a pioneer of genre of novel in Armenian literature. Many male novelists who came after her, who are praised in the history of literature books today for featuring themes that focus on the everyday life, domestic matters, love and romance, family affairs, and the connection and their connection to socioeconomic relations actually come from Dussap's novels. Dussap also showed how personal is political. So while advocating for women's rights to choose their romantic partners and to enjoy mutual love and passion in their relations, Dussap's works make a fiery case against the double standards of chastity and the unjust treatment of women based on sexuality. Dussap shakes the sexist definitions of honor from the ground by redefining morality as dignity, ethical judgment, and responsibility instead of sexual conduct. She attacks the systemic inequalities between the sexes. She criticizes religion, customs, law, which for her are mechanisms in the hands of men who keep all kinds of freedom and access to resources as their exclusive privileges. Refuting the argument that women are weak in their nature, she points to man-made conditions that have been preventing women from developing their mental and moral capacities. So Dussap's novels are not only declarations of objection against women's enslavement, they are also deeply analyzed and convincing declarations of the possibility of otherwise. In her texts, including her diary, she brings examples from the past and the present to prove women's sharp mind and strong will. Through the characters of her novels, she also breathes life into the free Armenian woman who is true to herself, and owns her life. Dussap repeated the idea of rejecting conformity to the conventions that ripped women of their freedom. According to her, the emancipated woman is aware of her rights and fulfills her duties towards her family and the Armenian nation. She is fully functioning, independent, and respected individual who occupies a meaningful place in society. She also created examples of men who are sensitive souls, loyal partners, and appreciative of women's work inside and outside home. It's fascinating how these feminist women were also coming up with idealized models of masculinity, heterosexual masculinity. Dussap's idealized modern Armenian women and men are juxtaposed in her novels with their unwanted and shamed opposites. These characters develop on the background of social and economic transformations in the Ottoman Armenian life. Although the elitist overtones in her narratives are not totally resolved, they always remain elitist, still Dussap's novels are unsparing critiques of social hierarchies, focusing on the discourses and practices around romance and marriage, or on the anxieties over shifting norms of femininity and masculinity. They offer an analysis of changing socioeconomic relations and values from the lens of gender and sexuality. Dussap's writings embody the feminist critique of enlightenment thought. She embraces the principle of celebrating reason, while at the same time elevating the value of sensitivity to a principal virtue in making sound judgments and in enhancing social relations. So the basic feminist criticism to Enlightenment thought was that in Enlightenment thought, reason is praised as at the expense of sensitivity and feelings. So basically, Dussap is giving equal importance to both reason and sensitivity in making sound judgments and in enhancing social relations. As much as we find Eurocentrism and the colonial discourses in Dussap's body of writings almost carbon copied from Western white feminism of her time, Dussap also raises a strong feminist critique of European, especially French education, political and legal systems, and this is very essential in her authorial voice and stance. It is important to note that one of the strongest themes that connects Dussap's feminist language with her contemporaries and the Western foremothers before her is her use of the analogy of women as slaves. As her French counterparts of the time, which she was probably closely following, she celebrated motherhood as women's unique calling, while also reproducing the popular Armenian national modernization discourse on mothers shaping the future of the people, just like many other feminists. She used this narrative of motherhood to demand a proper education for women in accordance with this vital role of motherhood. Dussap also redefined motherhood as the political power of women to influence men. As much as Dussap promoted the ideal of camaraderie between sexes, in the long path of emancipation in Dussapian world, women's soundest support were other women, be it mothers, like her own mother, sisters, and friends. In her novels, she depicted love and care, companionship, intellectual and artistic exchange, and solidarity between women. Moreover, in her posthumously published diary, we read that she openly called women to unite. She criticized women for causing harm to their sex, a sign of not having the true womanly consciousness. Similarly, her literary depiction of mother-daughter relations, mother-daughter relations as life-saving, was an extension of this outlook, something she enjoyed in her real life. it must be these predominant themes in her works, that is slavery, motherhood, and sentimentality as political power, that led one of her contemporaries compare her to abolitionist writer Harriet Beecher Stowe. The same author considered her the only novelist of the early period modern Western Armenian literature. So her contemporaries acknowledged her as the only novelist of early period modern Armenian literature, likening her to George Sand. And in fact, he was not alone in this association. Dussap was the Armenian George Sand, not only because she may have been influenced by her, but because she shared the same destiny. When Maida, her first novel, came out sometime in May or June 1883, its news quickly spread in Constantinople, Smyrna, and Tbilisi newspapers. You see the Ottoman and Russian Armenian feminist kind of connection here. It triggered discussions from its name, Maida, to the original language of the manuscript, whether it was written in Armenian, whether Dussap is fluent in Armenian or not, whether she's more fluent in French, whether she wrote in French first and translated into Armenian, whether it was copied from one of George Sand's novels. So it was kind of a big deal. While some qualified it as progressive and revolutionary, others got offended by its mention of equality of legal rights, women's right to freely love, and their demand to be active in public. And of course, in Maida, we're talking about a woman who is sexually active after her husband dies. A fierce pen battle started between two prominent male writers, Retios Berberian and Grigor Zohrab. And Armenian history is full of men fighting each other for similar, like Zohrab was attacking Dussap, and then some years later he was attacking Zabel Asator, but then actually he came around, so it's another story. But Retios Berberian from the very beginning was very supportive. While the former was a great supporter, Berberian was a great supporter of the novel and its author, the latter, Grigor Zohrab, argued that, this is a very young Zohrab, by the way, he's almost like in his early 20s, I think, argued that the ideas expressed in the novel were not in sync with the Armenian reality of the time and could even be detrimental to the Armenian family values that, 2022, we are still there, right? Arguing that women had no part in any of humanity's achievements, Zohrab argues that women have no part in any of humanity's achievements except for causing destruction. Zohrab attacked the idea of equality even to the extreme position of arguing that it was men who were oppressed. When another prominent male writer of the time, Yerya Demirci-Bashkian, invited Dussap to react back to these accusations, because they're like, everybody's looking for drama, and inviting Dussap to respond, in the journal Demirci-Bashkian edited, Dussap stated that she had nothing to add to what she had already expressed. In principle, she never cared if what she firmly believed to be true and thus spoke out was praised or condemned. Soon after this correspondence, Demirci-Bashkian would announce that Dussap's new novel was in press. So as a response, she wrote a new novel. Newspaper and journal editors competed each other in publishing the preface of this new novel, where Dussap addressed the backlash. Dussap's answer to her attackers was writing two new novels and letting the characters in Siranush and Araxia Ganvarjuhi respond. After completing her trilogy, Dussap stopped publishing for a while due to severe headaches that prevented her from any focus requiring activity. So it is very much debated, like, why Dussap stopped writing. So we know that it's actually mentions this, that it's because she was having severe headaches. But her letters to her close friend, photographer Kevork Abdullah, who is actually the photographer, famous Ottoman Armenian photographer who took this, the photo that we used in the flyer. The letters, these letters that she wrote to Kevork Abdullah, evidence that in 1887 and 1888, she was still active. She was not publishing any novels, but she was active, organizing events, running her salon, very important, and working for Tubrotaser and Asiagan and Gerutyon Asiatic Society, which was another charitable organization. In 1890, she left for Paris for treatment and was diagnosed with a blood pressure condition that gradually got better. While in Paris, her daughter Doreen was working with famous composers of the time. I said before she wanted to become a concert pianist. And her son, Edgar, was attending high school. Dussap, and her husband being French, of course, they have this organic connection to France. Dussap herself in Paris was making a vibrant circle of intellectuals and artists. This is when she met feminist author Juliette Adam and got fascinated by seeing a woman as the editor-in-chief of a journal, the renowned La Nouvelle Revue. So actually, on the left, you have Juliette Adam, a portrait of hers. And on the right, you have this is a new find. I'm very happy because, and I'm very thankful to Project Save. This is a new photograph of Dussap that we have from preserved in Project Save. So if you look at them, you see a lot of connections. In 1891, Dussap was deeply shaken with the loss of her daughter to tuberculosis at the age of 18. Following years were quieter times for her. She accepted house guests. We know it because from Yesayan's memoir, we know that she was accepting house guests. She spent time with her nieces, Araxia was her niece's name, and Astine, and paid regular visits to her daughter's grave. In many accounts on her, we read that it's because of her daughter's death that she was kind of retreated from public life and everything. But it's also important to note that this time is Hamidian repressions and also the Hamidian massacres, Armenian massacres. So Tebrosaser, her Tebrosaser was shut down in 1896 by the Ottoman government, and it's not gonna be reopened until 1908. So her last 10 years of the last 10 years of her life, she was mainly like running her salon and staying indoors. And she died of cancer in Pera on January 16, 1901. And if you ever come to Istanbul, you can pay a visit to her grave in the Latin Catholic cemetery of Feriköy, the family cemetery of Dussaps. And she's buried next to her daughter. Thank you. This is what I have. We can, if you have any questions.
Merci շատ Մելիսա ջան։ Կարող ենք երևի